Vice President J.D. Vance back here at home, carrying that same energy for the mission to the Conservative Political Action Conference today. Axios calling this the MAGA first month of the Trump presidency that is, quote, in their words, transforming America.
It's hard to believe we've only been in office for a month, because I think we've done more in a month than Biden did in about 4 years. Yeah. And thank God for that. But, you know, the president keeps us on a pretty breakneck pace. The whole goal of President Trump's agenda, like safety and prosperity, right? Yeah. It's pretty common sense stuff. We've done more on energy under President Trump's leadership than I think any administration in history, and that's not an exaggeration. And of course, we're going to do more. We're going to make it affordable to live in this country again. That's our mandate. That's our goal. Our message to the drug traffickers is get the hell out of our country. Your free ride is over because President Trump is back in the Oval Office. Follow the lead of Donald J. Trump, and that's free speech, borders, and sovereignty. That is the future for our shared civilization.
So borders are, Tom Homan, a crucial part of carrying out that immigration piece of that. He joins me in just a few minutes. But first, to Outkick columnist Mary Catherine Ham and former State Department spokesperson under President Obama, Murray Harf. Both are Fox News contributors. Great to have both of you with us. You know, it's interesting, Marie, let me start with you. When he was asked, you know, what's your message to drug traffickers? He said, get the hell out of our country. I don't remember hearing a message like that from the last border czar, Kamala Harris, or from Mayorkas, for that matter. What's your take on that?
Well, immigration was obviously one of the Trump-Vance campaign's key messages. And we saw from polling one of the main reasons that many people voted for them. They're deporting about the number of people that Barack Obama's administration deported. Obviously, they're looking at other things like sending people to Gitmo, rebuilding parts of the wall, et cetera. So I think that the focus on immigration is a good one. The problem, Martha, is that in the first 30 days, they've moved so fast to break things that they're also firing veterans and ending children's cancer research so kids with cancer won't be able to get cured. So they're doing a bunch of things they promised. They're also blowing up a lot of stuff that impacts people across the country, including in red states, including in places they really care about. So they're doing both at the same time. It's really a mixed bag sitting here 30 days in.
Well, Mary Catherine, I mean, it's not as if the former president's policies didn't hurt people along the way, and nobody wants to see anyone get hurt as a result of presidential policy. But what's your response to what Marie says?
Yeah, I think it doesn't go great making the pitch to the American public that the only victims of any policy are federal workers, right? Like, there is a giant bureaucracy. There are 2-point-something million workers. And a lot of people recognize as voters, like, hey, there's probably some of that is not using our money well. And frankly, Elon Musk's megaphone in explaining that to people is going to be helpful for people understanding that. And I think they're learning things that they never knew before, including the extraordinary protections that civil service workers have that normal workers do not have, right? So I think that's an interesting argument to be having. I think he'll get a lot of credit for moving fast on enforcement of immigration. The numbers of people coming over at the border is already so much lower that they're actually gaining credit for that right now. And I think one of the reasons that media coverage has moved over to DOJ is because people will be happy about the results on enforcement, so they've moved on to another thing. But look, I think there can be consequences to moving fast and breaking things if you break the wrong thing. It is the opposite philosophy of the federal government. The federal government is never careful, but it's careful in this like profligate, ridiculous way where they just add things and say we're doing a great job. This is the explain yourself era for the bureaucracy, and they're going to have to do some of that. And I think the contrast of having basically a president in absentia for a couple of years versus this very fast pace, people are willing to give them a chance because they had this experience where a guy didn't seem to be leading, and now they have someone who does.
Yeah, I think they've heard for so long that, you know, these changes would be made and that things were going to be more efficient. And I do think that the move fast and break things once in a while, leading in several cases, as we've all seen, to the rehiring of people who are essential. But I think that the philosophy is, you know, scrape it down and then add what needs to be added based on where the need is. In the government. With regard to Zelensky and Putin, Marie, obviously you were the spokesperson at the State Department. This is what J.D. Vance had to say about how, about the approach to this from the White House and from President Trump. Watch this.
He, of course, is a very good negotiator, a very good businessman. He recognizes that a lot of these issues are tough. It's going to take a smart statesman to figure this stuff out, but we've got that in the White House, and I really believe that we're on the cusp of peace in Europe for the first time in 3 years.
We've heard from Michael Waltz that there's a frustration at the moment between Zelensky and Trump. I think that's pretty evident, but that the goal, as J.D. Vance points out there, the vice president, is to have peace in Europe for the first time in several years, Marie.
That's all of our goal. We all want this war to win, but I cannot emphasize enough how what President Trump is saying about Zelensky and Ukraine more broadly, blaming Ukraine for starting this war, which they did not do, is so contrary to decades of American foreign policy that stands up to dictators, that helped win World War II and fight fascism, and then in the Cold War defeated the Soviet Union and defeated communism. That was the cornerstone of American leadership. And for President Trump to come in and side with Vladimir Putin over and over and over again, and for J.D. Vance to go to Europe and meet with a neo-Nazi party in Germany and then criticize our European allies. Look, could we do things better with Ukraine? Sure. But this is not the American leadership that Democrats and Republicans like Marco Rubio for decades have talked about. This is a sea change, and we'll see how that plays out for
I think
our
we have
allies
seen
in
time
Europe.
and time again that President Trump does things that shock and that are often part of a negotiating tactic. We will have to watch and see where this goes, but we know what the end game is, and he has said that very clearly, that he wants the killing to stop. He wants there to be peace in this region. So this is an evolving story. We'll keep a close eye on it. Thank you both for being here. Marie Harf, Mary Catherine Ham, great to have you both here.
Elon and his Doge wrecking crew about to blow up the most despised government agency in the land. Word is the IRS is about to mass fire nearly 7,000 audit-loving, pencil-pushing workers from their roster. Musk telling Hannity that he had no choice but to pursue the Doge cuts.
As the president said, like there's a lot of rich people out there. They should be caring more about the country, because the reason they should be caring more about the country is if America falls, what do you think is going to happen to your business? What do you think? Do you think you're going to be okay if the ship of America sinks? Of course not. Like what I'm doing here, what the president's doing, is it's just long-term thinking. The ship of America must be strong. The ship of America cannot sink. If it sinks, we all sink with it.
But there could be a big, beautiful payoff for the American people if Doge is successful. Musk is mulling $5,000 Doge dividend checks funded by the savings from his Department of Government Efficiency. 47 seems on board, but some Democrats aren't sold.
There's even under consideration a new concept where we give 20% of the Doge savings to American citizens and 20% goes to paying down debt, because the numbers are incredible, Elon. So many billions of dollars, billions, hundreds of billions, and we're thinking about giving 20% back to the American citizens.
We are not in the business of giving out money. And honestly, I don't know what $5,000 will do for you.
Now, Harold, that woman, Jasmine Crockett, praised the stimmy checks back in the day. And now she says, what are you going to do with $5 grand?
Look, I said yesterday that paying down the debt should be the first priority. If you pay down the debt, you actually make it possible for more dollars to be lent to private companies because they're not, the public debt is not crowding that dollar. We pay $1 trillion almost in interest on our debt. If you're able to reduce that, that reduces government spending. That's the third, fourth most expensive thing government does. The $5,000 checks, I love the idea. I think you should only send it to people who earn less than $150,000 a year. Sending $5,000 to a multimillionaire here in New York or Boston or Philadelphia or New Jersey, when we should be paying down our debt, that to me is a bigger priority than all. I appreciate
You know what really reduces government spending? when the government spends less, Harold.
I appreciate, right. And when if they save money, they should pay their debt down. We had the conversation yesterday. I agreed. I respected your opinion yesterday. I disagree with it totally, but that is an opinion. I don't think that paying down the debt should be second to anything. $36 trillion. Your kids and my kids and our grandkids one day will be saddled continuing to paying this down. Finally, on what Elon said about Doge, it's unclear to me if the president and Mr. Musk are as thoughtful about, I use the word thoughtful to describe my pal Greg Gutfeld in this great article in Variety here in the last day or so, but it's unclear if they're being thoughtful about some of these cuts. Your buddy that got cut, CDC lost an office here in New York. 9/11, the survivors of 9/11 lost one of their offices here in New York. Republican and Democrat congressmen in New York and New Jersey sent a letter to Mr. Kennedy today asking him to restore that and to open that office back up. Bipartisan. Why? Because it's not clear to me that they're looking at all of this in a way where they're analyzing readiness, where they're analyzing whether or not these dollars are being spent effectively. There's no doubt there's fraud and waste and inefficiencies. I just hope they're more careful and more studious and fastidious as they go about making some of these cuts. But giving some money back to taxpayers, earning under $150,000 a year, and then paying down the debt, that ought to be the priority.
All right, Judge Jeanine.
Well, that's what he wants. He said, that's what the president just said.
He said to everybody.
You know what? Here's the bottom line.
But I like it.
I like the idea of giving $5,000 to everybody, not because I want it or don't want it, but let's do something across the board for everybody, and let's cut down on the debt. The most important thing we've got to do is stop spending, stop funding programs, stop paying for things we shouldn't be paying for. And today, the president signed an executive order that directs all of the federal agencies to identify and eliminate programs currently providing benefits to illegals. Do you know how much money that's going to save? We have spent so much money on illegals and on USAID and on duplicity. I was a local DA. I prosecuted Medicaid fraud. Let me explain something to you. That was not my charge, but it was so unbelievable. I got hundreds or tens of millions of dollars, and it's low-hanging fruit. That you can't say you have to make sure we don't do this and don't do that. Let's just start from square one and then decide what is essential. What is essential for the American government to survive? And most of the stuff we have is just payback to people who did this for that person or this for another person. And we've got to stop doing that. And, you know, the IRS letting go 6,000 employees, I have no problem with that because Joe Biden between 2021 and 2024 put on 25,000 new IRS agents. The only reason we even needed them was because of COVID. Nobody could figure out there was so much corruption who was getting paid and not paid. So, you know, we can't start crying and saying, oh, we can't do this. Let's just get it done, go down to brass tacks.
I'm not crying. I'm only saying your guy should not have been fired.
Well,
the
wait a
CDC
minute.
office
Why
shouldn't have
not?
been. The low-hanging fruit of Medicare is where they should have started. That's all I'm saying. There's a lot more money there. That's all. And I'm not crying.
Real men don't cry.
Okay.
The fired IRS agents, are those the ones with the guns, Dana?
No. Well, I don't know who they're. One person I follow said that these roughly half of them are the ones that go after audit small business owners and the self-employed. And so, but I think we're kind of missing one point here that I would add to this discussion, which is that don't forget it was Biden's Inflation Reduction Act that added $80 billion in IRS funding and 90,000 more IRS agents. So even with what they're saying that they want to do with Doge, the Biden IRA people still come out ahead for the IRS. And the other thing is you are about to watch the Democrats add to their list of priorities defending the IRS. So now they're digging an even bigger hole for themselves.
Yeah, Harold.
I'm not saying that Harold's not doing it, but
keep crying.
Our new friend is.
No, Harold. Greg.
Well, I mean, okay, so this dividend is not right, but it's persuasive.
Yeah.
You know, Doge wasn't supposed to be Robin Hood, but everybody loves Robin Hood. Especially if he's robbing on behalf of you. And Trump understands, hey, if the government's been ripping you off, and giving it to cronies, maybe it's time we get in on the action. Trump is like Omar in The Wire, stealing from the drug dealers. I get the idea, but it's not going to help solve the debt crisis unless you look at it long term. And this is where I straddle the fence. Oh, and it hurts.
That's not you. That's not the way you roll. You never straddle the fence.
Okay, so look at this long term. How do you keep the public supportive of Doge over time? Because I'm suffering from Doge exhaustion disorder. I wake up every morning. It's like getting a new puppy every day. I love it. But after 20 puppies, I mean, come on. But you know what? You know what's amazing? Trump fulfilled the most outrageous boast he ever made. You're going to win so much, you're going to get tired of winning. And it's actually happening. I mean, maybe he knew that was going to happen. But so here's the deal. The dividend will keep supporters so you can continue with Doge after Trump. It's a bribe. But at least it's going to the citizens who've been ripped off and not some graduate of Brown who's getting their, student loan canceled in order to vote for Biden. We went through that. So it's not right. It's persuasive. If it's right, you devote it to preventing financial ruin. If it's persuasive, you try to do that while giving the public a fat green bone. That's what you want. That's what you want. And back to you, there's no counter argument. Right now, they're losing on Doge already. You add a Doge dividend, I mean, that's going to be more popular than Women of the Bible cookbook.
Why is giving your money back a bribe?
Well, I guess what I'm trying to say is we are looking at the budget.
So they should
we have to shrink the government so you lower interest rates so that you can jumpstart the economy and then they'll get their money back. Sure, you can give them their money. It is their money, but you're not doing in 10 years when, our expenditures will be 7 times what we bring in. There won't be a country left, Jesse. How will you afford your hair gel?
You're talking about $55 billion that they saved
already
compared to the trillions Congress is spending.
Yes.
If Congress takes in $7 trillion in revenues and they spend $9 trillion, that's where the real savings are.
Can I add one thing?
Yeah.
It's like if you have, let's say that there's a person that has a lot of credit card debt. And then at the office, they all of a sudden find out they're getting a bonus. And it's a $5,000 bonus. What you would tell that person is you should pay down the credit card debt so that you can start getting ahead in the future. That would be
in your face.
The other argument.
That's why the other 20% is going toward the deficit.
You also need to spend less, Dana.
Well, you give them $5.
Exactly. That's the point. But you got to pay down your debt.
But these numbers he's talking about, in order to give everybody $5,000, that means you have to have $500 billion. So that's 20%. That means they think they're going to save $2.5 trillion. I'm just 100 million Americans at $5,000. That means that's $500 billion.
Now I just lost you.
If you give $5,000 to 100 million people, do it in the brain.
I don't know why we're even fighting about this. You know why?
I'm not fighting.
With what the Democrats were doing, we were going under in a minute.
Well, we're still going.
But DEI Democrats are blaming for everything. But let's just look at this plan.
But who did the spending?
This plan doesn't. He has to save $2 trillion, $2.5 trillion to do this plan.
At least he's trying.
We'll give him
We'll get there. Up next, a MAGA sports takeover. Tiger Woods showing up at the White House today.
Trey Gowdy, former congressman from South Carolina. USA Today White House correspondent Francesca Chambers and Josh Kraushaar is a Fox News radio political analyst. Josh, you can't deny that this has been fast and furious, but to listen to Stephen Miller kind of lay it all out there at the White House, what's your take of this 30 days?
Well, it's hard to believe it's only been a month. It feels like it's been a year with all the executive orders, a lot of disruption across the board with the federal bureaucracy, a lot of chaos and disruption on the foreign policy stage, as we've learned this week. Look, there's some new polls out this week. It looks like Donald Trump still has higher job approval numbers right now than he did almost throughout that first term, but they are a little bit on the decline. And I think the big concern, if you're the Trump administration, is that there is growing worries about the state of the economy. And inflation is still a nagging worry for a whole lot of Americans, including a lot of those Republican voters that backed him in hopes that the price of groceries would go down and price of eggs would go down and so on. So, I think the one concern if you're the Trump administration, in addition to, they're breaking a lot of things and hoping it works out for the best, but I think fundamentally prices are going to need to be stabilized, and there's going to need to be a laser focus on making sure people can afford the price of groceries, the price of housing. That is going to be what ultimately decides the success of his first year.
And it's interesting that, Francesca, there's now talk about Doge dividend checks mentioned at the White House today. Take a listen.
The way that it works is when you achieve savings, you can either return it to taxpayers, you can return it to our debtors, or it can be cycled into next year's budget.
And when is it that people might see those checks?
Well, this is all going to be worked on through the reconciliation process with Congress that's going underway right now. As you've seen, the Senate's moving a bill, the House is moving a bill. The president has great confidence in both chambers to deliver on his priorities.
Francesca, what about that? Obviously, sending checks to 79 million households could be inflationary in some way, but obviously people would welcome those $5,000 checks.
Well, to this point, Brett, insiders and allies have noted that President Trump has been able to get through his first month using a lot of executive orders to deliver on his campaign promises. But now the focus turns to Congress to be able to deliver on his agenda, because so much of what he's saying in his executive orders, as the administration has acknowledged, has to be funded by Congress, especially when it comes to immigration. And so it will be up to Congress in those either the two bills or the one bills to put money behind those priorities. And just to give you a sense of the timeline for that, you heard J.D. Vance, the vice president, to say today, and a former senator say that even at the fastest possible pace, it would be May or June before you could realistically get that bill passed.
And I should point out, Speaker Johnson said he'd like that money to go towards paying down the debt or paying for what they're dealing with in the budget, as opposed to sending it checks right now. Meantime, Trey, your friend who you advocated for, Kash Patel, is now FBI director, despite some late pushback from Democrats outside the FBI building today. Take a listen.
Kash Patel, mark my words, will cause evil in this building behind us, and Republicans who vote for him will rue that day.
This is someone we cannot trust. This is someone who lacks the character to do this job, someone who lacks the integrity to do this job.
My Democratic colleagues want to act like November the 5th never happened. But actually, the election was a repudiation of the Biden administration, including its Department of Justice and FBI.
There were only 5 senators there, not a big crowd, but Patel posted what his mission is. My mission as director is clear. Let good cops be cops, rebuild trust in the FBI, work alongside the dedicated men and women of the Bureau and our partners. We will rebuild an FBI the American people can be proud of. And to those who seek to harm Americans, consider this your warning. We will hunt you down in every corner of this planet. It was one of the most controversial picks, but in the end, 51-49.
Yeah, Brett, it's just not controversial among us, those of us who worked with him. I mean, the notion of Adam Schiff talking about fairness and impartiality and respect for the rule of law, it's just honestly a little more than I can handle. Kash Patel will be more fair to his critics than they ever were to him. He's a former prosecutor, former public defender. Look, give the guy a chance. I worked elbow to elbow with him. Give the guy a chance. He will exceed your expectations. And I'll tell you this, Brett, he'll be a lot more fair to Adam Schiff than Adam ever was to him.
All right, panel, stand by if you would. Up next, comments.
Well, President Trump signing a new executive order to strip illegal immigrants of all taxpayer benefits. Now, the White House says those funds will be diverted to help American citizens who are truly in need, like those with disabilities and veterans. Griff Jenkins has the latest from Washington. Griff.
Hey, Emily, this is welcome news to border officials who have been saying for years that free stuff like federal benefits are a major pull factor or incentive driving illegal immigration. Now this order wants to end that, telling every federal department and agency to root out and cut off any programs providing benefits to illegal migrants. Take a look. The Congressional Budget Office estimates that benefits for illegal migrants before this order over the next 10 years would include tens of billions you see here for Obamacare, Medicaid, tax credits, food stamps. Vice President Vance spoke about the order earlier this morning.
So many of our issues come back to the border because if you take 30, 40 million illegal aliens, you take Medicare fraud, Social Security fraud. Why are we taking the people's Social Security payments and giving it to illegal aliens? We know that's happening in the United States of America today. We've got to stop it.
The Federation for American Immigration Reform says taxpayers have been spending already over $180 billion annually, and the Manhattan Institute estimates every new illegal immigrant cost about $130,000. Now, the order also mandates improvements in welfare eligibility verification. That's important, Emily, because if you recall back in 1996, President Clinton signed a law to end welfare abuse. It barred illegal immigrants from receiving a wide range of benefits. But under the Biden administration, once they got paroled into the U.S., they became qualified aliens and became eligible again for some benefits. That now should end. Emily?
Griff Jenkins, thank you. All right, Cheryl, $182 billion annually. I can't even wrap my mind around that. And the saddest, most heartbreaking part is how many veterans and underserved and single mothers here are just getting absolutely obliterated with zero protections and zero actually efficient programs. And yet we're spending all of this to create, as Griff says, a pull factor.
And you've got millions of Americans that are living beneath the poverty line in this country. You've got families that can't afford to eat. You've got low-income families that are going to McDonald's for their meals, and those costs are now going up. They can't afford the cost of rent, housing. We've got a housing crisis in this country. So you've got Americans on one side, and then you've got the migrants on the other. Look at what it's cost New York City. We've spent $5 billion just here in New York City over 2 years. That was supposed to, per year. That was, we've talked about this $12 billion, $15 billion of the city. That looks like it's going to be stopping here. But because of what Griff just outlined, it is the cost of it is housing, it is healthcare, school, all of it. And taxpayers are saying enough is enough, especially those taxpayers that cannot afford to house and feed their own children are now spending their taxpayer dollars to migrants. And that's what we saw November. It was about the economy and immigration, guys. That was the election in November. Two biggest issues.
And Carly, so many taxpayers were also sort of picking up and moving because we saw here in this state, so granted it's federal versus state, but the reality is that as local families were being pushed off soccer fields and pushed out of schools and the like, so they picked up and moved to Florida. They picked up and moved elsewhere. So the cost-benefit analysis too includes the ripple effect of the loss of those tax dollars that then we're battling and somehow just printing money and giving them out to others.
Yeah, and there's also another forward-looking, future-looking number that the Congressional Budget Office released that says over the next 10 years, the federal government was planning on spending $177 billion on benefits for illegal immigrants. And to put that into perspective, if you spend $1 million a day, it would take you 485 years to spend that much money. That is crazy. And the thing, this gets under Donald Trump's skin just for the sheer principle of it, but also because some of this money is going to Laken Riley's killer, who stayed in a taxpayer-funded hotel in New York City and then took a taxpayer-funded flight to Atlanta, Georgia, where she lost her life. And the thing that strikes me this week is that we're now exactly a month into Donald Trump's second term, and he's not letting up on this issue. It's not just remain in Mexico and build the wall. It's increased drone flights to hunt fentanyl labs, labeling cartels as terrorist organization, repatriation flights to countries that we don't even have diplomatic ties to, like Venezuela. So he had 4 years to think about this, and he is executing right now. And I would really love for somebody to interview Alejandro Mayorkas right now and say, you said the border was secure then? Well, then how do you explain this compare and contrast that we're seeing right now?
Totally. And as we talk about fentanyl right now, we have hearings as to reclassify it, the substance of it. Kaylee, talk to me about how the Democrats and those on the liberal left are just screaming that this is rooted in racism when we know that Americans struggled so hard to put food on the table over the last administration. And as Carly articulated, yet illegal immigrants enjoyed plane flights and five-star hotels here in the city and so much more. It has nothing to do with racism. It has to do with putting on your oxygen mask before you put on the mask on others.
Yeah, you think about the Social Security Trust Fund and how it's set to run out at some point, and you think about all of the young people who are paying into a system they may never take from.
Yeah.
And then you hear something like these immigrants who are illegal immigrants, getting benefits. And there's a 1996 federal law that's supposed to ban illegal immigrants from getting federal benefits. But there's an exception. If you're paroled into the country, you become a qualified alien, or you can get these benefits. and in 5 years get full benefits. So just sit and think about that. As Social Security may run out, you have the Biden administration saying, you know, we'll make paroling easier. We'll let you parole in place and then take your benefits. That's what we're dealing with. And I don't like declarative statements, but I will declare this loudly. Alejandro Mayorkas, to your point, is the worst nominee or cabinet member ever in modern history. He allowed this to happen. The Biden administration allowed this to happen, and there was virtually zero accountability along the way.
Yeah, I'll never forget him showing up at a charity hockey match in D.C., insistent on dropping the puck when the border was in absolute flames. And I just wondered where the hell my tax dollars were going in the form of his salary. Doctor, talk to us about the health issues. So we saw, as Griff put on the screen, all of those astronomical numbers that are going toward illegal immigrant mothers and the like. But the reality is that we have atrocious, for example, mortality rates among African Americans of any developed country. We have atrocious health conditions here. So why have we not, or how can we start prioritizing those people, those Americans who are suffering in our own communities before handing out bills and dollars to the health care of people coming in illegally?
You are so right. And I interviewed multiple people down on the border in our hospitals down there, and they were overwhelmed already before the illegal immigrants came in. And they come in, of course, there's the issue with fentanyl, and there's the issue of getting hurt on their way running across the border. There's the issue of bringing infectious diseases. How can we demand vaccinations here but let anybody run through the border without any vaccines or without any screenings, the way you do with legal immigration? We are a country of immigrants. We're not a country of illegal immigrants. We saw during the pandemic that we barely survived. That's your point. Our healthcare system barely survives an onslaught. Imagine what this is doing to it. And I'm applauding the idea of what President Trump is doing, of a multifaceted approach. You want to cut down on fentanyl, make it Schedule 1. Put tariffs on China so the ingredients don't go flooding into Mexico. Close the border to the cartels. We're down from 96,000 to 60,000 border apprehensions. We got to go to zero. We got a long way to go still.
Yeah.